Hello, and welcome to Journey to Virtuous. This is a podcast for women who've been called to do something greater than what we know we are able. So we know that it's a call by God, and we need to work up the courage to get to the work. So I'm thankful for you all being here with me today. I'm your host, Shawn Pearson, and I want to share a little bit with you about the process and trusting the process that you're in. Being called to do something greater than what you believe you have the capacity to do can be overwhelming. And so I want to share a bit of my journey. It's been 20 plus years now, and I still sometimes have to do this work scared. But more than that, I'm recognizing the change that is happening in me. I'm recognizing the growth that's taking place in me, a maturing that is taking place in me. But there's some things that are unexpected for me as well. And I want to just share that, so I don't want you to be surprised if you start to go through some of the same changes too. So for me, being called to the journey to virtuous happened at age 26. I was actually in a hospital at the time that the Lord spoke to me and told me that he wanted me to be his example, or he's called me to be his example of a virtuous woman. And to be honest, I didn't know what that meant. And so after I got out of the hospital, I had to actually go and look up the word virtuous. And the Webster's Dictionary said of good moral character. So for me, being 26, knowing what I had done the summer before, knowing some of the poor choices that I had made, I thought God had made a mistake. I thought that I was not fit to do the work that he was calling me to do. There was nothing about my life or my walk that had prepared me or given me the credentials to be able to be his example of a virtuous woman. I had been a teenage mom. I had lost my scholarship because I got pregnant. I got married and divorced early. My first marriage, I was 19. My second marriage that I was in at the time that God called me, I was 24. And there was just a whole lot going on in my life that disqualified me to be leading anybody, at least I thought. And so during that season, I spent a lot of time doubting what God said and justifying why I wasn't fit to do the work. What I didn't realize was that there are hundreds, even thousands of women coming behind me, young women that needed to know that God was still going to use them in spite of the life that they had lived, in spite of the decisions that they had made for themselves. And so I ran for 7 full years. So from 1996 to 2003, you couldn't get me to admit or to own the responsibility of the work that I was called to do. I was always making an excuse. I was dating on and off. I would make excuses for why I wouldn't go to church or why I wouldn't be in the Word or why I wasn't qualified to do something, always looking for a reason not to. And in those 7 years, I recognized there were a lot of things, a lot of gifts that God had placed in me that I stopped using. One of them was the gift of song. I was blessed to be able to write whole songs. I could hear the melody, I could hear all the lyrics plain as day, and I'd write those songs out. But being in a relationship with someone who didn't believe in the gifts that I had caused me to close down. It caused me to stop using my gift. And so I spent a lot of time hiding from the call. I spent time making other people great. I was a great cheerleader. I could be behind the scenes of other people's greatness. In fact, during those 7 years, I helped several other people launch their nonprofits or their for-profit businesses, including the gentleman that I was dating. So he was in the forefront, looking great, looking wonderful, but I was doing all the work because I didn't believe that I was qualified to be the face of any great work. But in 2003, I made a decision to step out on faith, but it was a moment of crisis that really brought me to that. From 2001 to 2003, after I relocated to another state, it was my opportunity to begin again. And so no one knew me in the new state. No one knew the poor choices that I had made prior to living in the new state. And so it was an opportunity for me to start over. I could start over as a mom. I could start over as a divorced woman. I could start over as a professional, and I could do things differently. But there was a window of time, even though I knew what I was called to do, that I still doubted. And that process that I had to go through of healing, most importantly, forgiving, building my confidence. Mostly in that healing process, it was really all about forgiving myself. I took a moment during that time to finalize the first book that I authored, Journey to Virtuous. And that book was a journal that I had actually started writing to my children when I had planned to commit suicide so many years before. I wanted my children to understand what had gone wrong. I wanted them to understand some of the things that they had seen and I tried to protect them from, but it was some wounded situations and some things that wounded them. But that journal was all about helping them understand some things about life once they got older. Because as a teenager, unfortunately, I lost my mother, and there were so many unanswered questions. And sadly, my solution to that, instead of staying alive and trying to raise my children, my solution to that was to write a journal so that they would understand those things. And the questions that they wouldn't get a chance to ask me the answers were going to be in that journal for them. So I took that journal, I turned it into a book, and I chose to share it with the world. But in this process of healing, I was still ashamed by all of the things that I had written down. And so it took me another 7 years after the manuscript was finished to deal with myself. I had to address all of the unforgiveness that was in my heart for people who had wounded me. I had to forgive myself for some of the very poor decisions that I had made. And in fact, the first time I published the book, I didn't put my face on it because that process of forgiving myself made me say, in case this goes wrong, in case people decide they're going to judge me for what they read in this book about me, they're going to have to prove that it's actually me that wrote it. And so ridiculously, I didn't put my face on the book. I didn't do a bio that said anything about me, but I just needed to get it out. And I was fortunate enough by 2013 to actually stand on a stage and share openly about my testimony. And that was part of my process, being able to take a step toward actually saying openly all those things that created the self-defeating thoughts, all of those things that caused me to doubt the potential that was in me, that caused me to doubt the call that was on my life. You see, God knew all about me more than I knew about myself. So when he called me, he already knew what he was presenting to the world. And I understand now that it's in spite of me. I understand now that the me that I was as this work got started to do Journey to Virtuous, God wanted to show other women that it's not about the degrees we have. It's not about how beautiful the world believes that we are. It's not about who our parents are or are not. It's not about our race. It's not about any of those things that society has used to define whether we would be great. But it's simply the call that God put on my life that qualified me to stand before you all and say, you can do whatever it is God has called you to do. So Journey to Virtuous tells the story of my life as I was working through the process of forgiving myself, as I was working through the process of understanding that it's not about the qualifications that the world has, and it's not even about whether or not I felt like I was ready to do the work. Like I said before, even though I'm doing the work now, some days I'm doing it scared. Some days when I have to get in front of this camera, I don't want to be dressed up. I don't want to be made up. I don't want my hair to be combed. I am content to be in my jeans and my t-shirt with my head wrap and my big hoop earrings, but I won't necessarily receive or reach all of the women that need to hear God is going to use you no matter what you look like. And so I'll dress up from time to time. I like to feel pretty. That's the right way to say it. I got ready to change that, but I'm gonna say from time to time, I like to feel pretty. Some days I don't care if I feel pretty. I thank God that my husband loves me anyway, but some days I don't want to be dressed up. Some days I just want to be Shawn. I don't want to be CEO. I don't want to be the daughter caring for parents. I don't want to be the perfect wife. I don't want to be the perfect sister. I just want to be Shawn. And that's part of the process, learning to be okay with who you are so that you can walk out the work just the way you are, not trying to get perfect before you start to do the work. Because the important thing to remember is that somebody's life is depending on us walking in our calling. Somebody else needs to hear that it's okay to be imperfect and to start to do the work anyway. There's a young lady that was really close to me and my daughters some years ago. She passed away at the age of 31. Her name is Kaya. And when we lost Kaya, there was a realization for me that I had more than a decade to invest in her life. And because I was scared, there was a lack of investment on my part. I didn't feel like I had anything to offer to her. She had a mom, she had a sister, she had individuals in her life. And so I didn't invest the time that I could have with Kaya. Now, I'm not saying that because I didn't invest the time that she would have maybe still been here. But what I am saying is I had an opportunity to sow into a young woman's life, and I didn't do it because I made excuses for why I wasn't good enough. And how many other Kayas are there in my life? How many other women need to hear where God has brought me from, and I was ashamed to say it, or I was afraid to say it, or I didn't feel like I looked the right part to say it. My hair wasn't combed yet, so I couldn't do it, or I couldn't afford the production team to be able to do it, or I wasn't polished enough to be able to do it. Every excuse that I made along this process of developing was a delay in me walking in purpose, which means it was a delay in someone else hearing my testimony and being able to be inspired and encouraged to do whatever it is God has called you to do. And so for those of you who've been waiting, I apologize. But I tell you, I'm on the road. I'm going to do it scared. I'm going to do it tired. I'm going to do it with my allergies impacting me. I'm going to do it no matter how I'm feeling, because I understand that someone else's destiny is connected to mine. Someone else's future, someone else's hope is connected to me walking out this process. So whether I want to be in heels or I want to be in jeans, you all will see me. Whether I want to comb my hair or not comb my hair, you all are going to see me. Whether I want to finish the book or not finish the book, you ladies and you gentlemen will see me. And you're going to see guests that will tell their stories that may be different from mine, but that you can relate to. There'll be other authors. They'll share their stories, their testimonies through books that they've written, through different podcasts and things that they're doing. But you're going to see us. We're going to be intentional to walk out this process and to walk it out with you. I want you to know that you are not alone. I want you to know that you're not the only one going through a process of healing. I want you to know that as you are starting that ministry, as you are starting that business, you are going to struggle. There are going to be some times where you say, forget it, I'm going to go back and work for somebody else. Or forget it, I'm not going to do this anymore because it's too hard. I don't have the money. I don't have all the other resources I might need. But I want to encourage you to trust the process. When God told me what I was going to be doing, it's 20 some years later before I'm standing before the camera to actually tell the story. But I've been in the process the whole time, from the moment I got the instruction to be his example of a virtuous woman to this moment today as I sit before the camera. I am in a process. It is a process of healing. It's a process of pruning those things off of me that don't need to be there, that lack of confidence, that lack of assurity that God can use me. It's a process of purging some things out of me, the laziness, the procrastination, the fear of failure, even the fear of success, even the fear of being intimidated by wealth. Those are things that had to be purged from me. The unforgiveness of people that have harmed me or harmed my children. All of those things that we carry in our heart hinder us from being effective in the call on our lives. And we walk out our woundedness through relationships, through lack of engagement in the things that we're supposed to be doing. But I want to tell you today, trust the process. What God has for you to do is not just for you. What God has for you to do is to be his hands and his feet here in the earth. It's for me. It's for other people that are going to see and hear your story. It's for those of us who need to be inspired to know that God is still real. In a world where people are denying God, in a world where people have just decided that they are their own God, in a world where people are saying there is no God, I want you to know he's real. I want you to know he will use everyday people just like you and I to do great things, to touch the lives of other people. I want you to know that you can trust the process, because the greatness that is in you is so much bigger than you can imagine. What God has for me is so much bigger than what I can imagine. And so I'm excited to be part of this journey to virtuous with you. I'm excited that you're on this journey with me. And I'm excited for the future that God has for all of us. So thank you for joining me today. I want to spend more time with you in other episodes with other guests, but stay tuned for some great things, and hopefully you'll reach out to me and you'll want to be a guest on the show and tell your story, tell God's story in your life. So stay tuned for other episodes, and thank you for joining me today. Again, I'm Shawn Pearson, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for joining me on my podcast, A Journey to Virtuous. Please like and subscribe. If you'd like to know more about the work that I'm doing, please visit me on social media at thezioninstitute.org or Whisper Consulting, or also Shawn Pearson Journey Coach. You can also find me on one of my websites, thezioninstitute.org, thezioninstitute.org, or whisperconsulting.com. That's WISPHER consulting.com. Thank you for your support.